Are you maximizing the return on time when you're investing in a book? Have you ever thought about it? Like, we spend some money, just pick a book. Most importantly, you spend your time, but are you reading effectively? Are you getting the best out of the book? Because more than anything, as I keep telling, books are a treasure trove of knowledge. Like, months of research would have gone in drafting a book. It's a culmination of several experiences put together. So question yourself, are you reading effectively? Are you getting the best out of a particular book when you're actually reading it? That's something you got to think, and that's what we want to discuss today. How to read effectively. Without any further ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, do not track the wrong metrics. It's always about quality. So don't think about how fast you've read in a book. You see a lot of people boasting like, oh, I read this book in let's say 1 day. Of course, there will be some exceptions where people would have practiced some techniques and you can read in a faster way. But for a regular person, if you're not used to certain techniques, don't track how fast you've read a particular book. Always think about how much of information you gathered from that book, or how are you able to relate it to your personal needs or anything. For example, how far are you curious about a particular thing just because you read something new in that particular book. These are certain things which you need to track while reading a book. It's not about the time you took to actually read. So it's not about how fast you read, but how effectively you read. And in fact, the best thing is, if let's say you really love something about a book, it will actually help you learn more about it, or you spend more time on that book. Because let's say you read something, you got inspired, so maybe you can just quickly go and jot down some ideas or thoughts. It can open up your thought process. So inherently, without even thinking, you're spending more time with that particular book. So it's not always about, as I told, like in what time you finish the book, but how much have you gained by reading that particular book? Think from a return on investment perspective. As I told, investment is not just about money, but it's your time which you're putting in. So always think like, okay, now I'm reading this book. How can I effectively learn from this? Or how can I read more effectively? So always think from that perspective. Please do not track the wrong metrics. Second thing is, always preview the material. So there's a saying which goes by saying that it's much more easier for you to solve a jigsaw puzzle if you actually have seen how the picture looks once the puzzle is solved. Similarly, if you want to get the gist of the book, to see like what exactly you can learn out of it, always have a preview of the book so that you have a first-hand idea of what exactly this book can help you with. Because of that, whenever you're reading sub-chapters or each chapter individually, then there are higher chances that you can learn much more from this particular thing. Because now you have the idea of the bigger picture, right? So because of that, you're able to relate every single chapter to this bigger picture. So there are higher chances that you can read more effectively in this particular way. So always try to preview the book. So again, how exactly can you preview the book? For example, most of the books have like chapters, illustrations, they have a structured layout, right? So just try to have a gist of everything. Just try to get some basic idea. Once you understand the big picture, then it's a lot more easy for you to connect the dots. So always try to understand for yourself, like, are you getting the big picture? Like the big promise which the book has given you. Once you see that you're able to relate to that big picture, that's when I think you can start focusing on individual chapters. There are higher chances that you might feel that everything is just going super fast, or you might miss some details while you're just previewing the book, but it's completely normal. The whole idea is for you to understand what sort of framework you want to use going forward whenever you're picking up a book. And once you've standardized the framework in which you want to learn a particular topic or a particular book, things will be much more easier for you because you're used to that particular framework. And you will start relating everything in that particular framework. So try to get to a framework that will help you to understand how we can effectively read something. So again, of course, like now we've briefly learned like what are the effective ways of reading something, right? At the same time, try to understand what not to do when it comes to reading effectively. The first and foremost thing is rereading immediately won't help. We all have this tendency, right? Let's say you read a chapter, you liked it, or probably you didn't make much sense of it. So we have a tendency to just again reread the same chapter. You get some familiarity because let's say you've just spent some time on it, right? So you can relate to some words or you can easily recall some words, but it only leads to a false deception that you're learning something. This is not at all effective. The neurons in your brain will not make any connections if you are trying to do something like this. If you really want to reread something, make sure just giving at least a day gap so that you can actually comprehend much more easily. And in between, you can just supplement it with some other learning materials or some active learning methods that you can use, so that you can actually grasp much of this information more effectively. So that's one way you can try and reread, by giving some gap. But again, it's not like one size fits all, right? Like say, for example, there are some really complex topics or something which is completely new to you. That's when probably you can actually reread stuff to at least get a basic grasp of it. That's one exception which you can actually take. But one thing is, ultimately, the first time you read something will only help you to get a grasp of that particular topic, sleep over it, consolidate some concepts. But the second time you read, I think that's when you'll actually focus on the details. Because now you're familiar with the concept, so now you start thinking in a much more deeper sense. So you'll start understanding, okay, probably this is what this particular thing meant. So you'll start relating to it much more fluently. And that is something which can actually help. So the final conclusion I would like to say is, as I told, rereading repeatedly, instantly is not very helpful. That will only give you a false sense of like learning something, but it's not effective. Again, one more important thing that you got to understand is highlighting is not at all effective. But a lot of us are actually into that habit, right? We just highlight, we just use a sketch or something to highlight something, but it's not effective. You might think that you're probably highlighting the important ones and you can get back to it, but it's not a very effective way of reading something. So instead of that, just try and follow these basic steps. Like how we previously mentioned, always have a purpose why you're reading that book. Once the purpose is clear, then it'll be a lot more easier for you to grasp new concepts. So that's something you can do. So that's it for now. And we have some big news. We are opening up our beta access starting from July 4th. If you haven't signed up on our waitlist, please do immediately. We got some exceptionally good early feedback that got us really excited, and we cannot wait for more people to try it out and use it. Also, we have started another initiative called Zuperly Talks, where we pick one startup, we just talk about it, and then you can get to understand like what exactly they've done that have helped them to grow phenomenally. And it's not like always phenomenal is not just about, minting unicorns, right? Even if it's a bootstrap company and they got a certain level of revenue, that's phenomenal as well. In that regard, we've picked a company called Tally as our first topic. Please do check it out in our description. Along with that, you can also have a sneak peek of how a learning space in Zuperly looks like, which the link of which is shared in the description of that particular video. So please do go check it out, and trust me, you won't be disappointed, and you'll get to know a thing or two about how exactly you can bootstrap a startup.